Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the course of Bill S3, the conversations I had with the Honourable Minister in this place in June, the attempts to remove all vestiges of historic gender-based discrimination have now come to a good place. I think the new and expanded role of a Senate with independent senators, and indeed the role of Indigenous senators in the other place, Senator Dan Christmas was referenced, Senator Murray Sinclair, have helped enormously in bringing about that sober second thought that we used to think that other chamber was capable of providing, but particularly from an Indigenous perspective. My question to the Minister now, and I certainly applaud and appreciate that we are taking this bill forward as amended to passage, but I think it's time, and I'm going to say this out loud for the first time, or at least the first time I've said it in this place, I think it's time we repeal the Indian Act. There's a lot of discussion about how we need to consult with First Nations and Indigenous people before we repeal it. They didn't pass it. It's a vestige of a colonial history, and it's inherently discriminatory and racist. So I know this is a tough question, and I know the Minister has now had the department split in two, and this question is squarely in front of her. But I will ask her, when can we start the conversation about when, not if, we repeal the Indian Act?
The Honourable Minister.
I thank the member for the question, and the Indian Act is hugely disturbing to us as a government that really enshrined all the bad policies of the superiority of the settlers into the Indian Act, which then discriminated against the First Peoples of this country. The kind of consultation that is required now to actually understand what replaces the Indian Act is what communities are worried about. How do we reconstitute nations as nations instead of these villages that were created under the Indian Act in what Lee Maracle calls villagizing tiny communities, and then Canada was able to take the land from in between. So reconstituting nations and having nations then able to have self-determination, have self-government, that is the direction that our government is going. We want to see that happen. There has to be an alternative, because the fiduciary rights of the Government of Canada to First Nations must be codified, and that we actually have to have some other place in place. My job, as my mandate letter says, to accelerate the progress of communities getting out from under the Indian Act as quickly as they possibly can.